Hello and welcome to another video in our Rings of Power series where we are trying to analyze and dissect everything that is surrounding the Amazon show that is due to be released on September the 2nd. This time we are going to analyze why the Rings of Power is a failure and why it is a disrespect to Tolkien. If you have gone to different forums or groups or Facebook or Twitter and you have been called anist and a foe because you express your concerns over this show, then maybe you know what we are talking about. That every time that anyone, really anyone, voices their opinion about what this show is going to entail and why they are wary of it, the rebuke is always the same. You are an ist and a foe, and you don't like people of color to take part in entertainment and even more so in fantasy storytelling. So what we are going to talk about here is how the Rings of Power is not respecting Tolkien in one of its most essential parts, and that is how Tolkien viewed religion, more importantly his own religion, which was Catholicism, and how the work that he created is essentially Catholic, but people that are behind the Rings of Power not only ignore that, they have not addressed it at all and are completely clueless as to the importance of this element in Tolkien's writing. So let's dive into it. In letter 142, Tolkien wrote the following quote: "The Lord of the Rings is of course a fundamentally religious and Catholic work, unconsciously so at first, but consciously in the revision. That is why I have not put in or have cut out practically all references to anything like religion, to cults or practices in the imaginary world, for the religious element is absorbed into the story and the symbolism." End quote. The story of Catholicism is plagued with examples of redemption, of repentance, of penitence, of course, and sacrifice as well. But all of that is also covered with one element that makes it all quite revealing to the people that practice it, and that is temptation. Almost pretty much every figure that is important in that religion is tempted in one way or another. Even the very essence, the very person, the very personality that is Jesus Christ was tempted by the devil in this case for 40 days in the desert. So surviving temptation, that is at the core of what being a Catholic is all about. This temptation, of course, goes for villains like Gollum, who takes the ring by committing murder. And yeah, the ring is that temptation. The power that it has is that temptation. But also good characters such as Boromir, for example, get tempted by the ring and they also fail at one point or another. We know that Boromir is a brave man, he's a man of Gondor, so he has honor, but even though he wants to do what's best for his people, he can't help but to fall into the temptation of trying to take the ring. So this is what is at the core of the Lord of the Rings as well. And of course there is redemption, like with Boromir himself trying to redeem himself by defending his friends after the attack from the Uruk-hai. Now I mention this because I know that at the core of the Rings of Power there is no religion whatsoever, and they are going to be very careful in not addressing anything Catholic in essence. But I mention this also because of what the Rings of Power seems to hint at. Even though this is an ensemble cast, it appears as if Galadriel is the real heroine of the story, the protagonist, the main one in the cast. And that image, that presence, is essentially also a Catholic image, that of Galadriel. Tolkien in his writings also equated Galadriel to the Virgin Mary, but it's going beyond that, and we shall see how Galadriel's personality getting changed is also a problem for the Rings of Power. In letter 320, Tolkien wrote, quote, "I think it is true that I owe much of this character to Christian and Catholic teaching and imagination about Mary. But actually, Galadriel was a penitent in her youth as leader of the rebellion against the Valar." End quote. I'm going to stop there just to point out how Galadriel was part of those that followed Fëanor in his quest to leave Valinor and get back the Silmarils. Now, she didn't take part in any of the oaths from the Sons of Fëanor. She didn't even cross with them. She wasn't there during the King's Laying. Her group arrived a little bit later, and they found out that they could not cross with the boats because Fëanor's host had burned them on the coast. So, what happened was that this particular group had to cross through the Helcaraxi, which was a strait of ice that was dangerous, and in fact it is mentioned that not everyone survived this plight. Of course, Galadriel could not go back to Valinor just like the rest of the Noldor, but she stayed in Middle-earth and learned from Emelian, who was a Maia, some crafts, mainly powers, arts of magic, and thanks to that, she was also capable of wielding one of the 3 rings given to the Elven Lords, and with that also helped turn Lothlorien into this beautiful forest, a beautiful location for elves. When in the Third Age she gets the visit from the Fellowship of the Ring, and she talks to Frodo, she passes the test, which was once again the temptation to take the ring for herself. She passes this test and is given permission to go back to the west, to Valinor, and she even says, "My power will diminish, I will also diminish, and I will remain only Galadriel, nothing more." This, right here, is her pardon, how she gets to eliminate, let's say, or surpass that penitence that she had taken upon herself, thanks to her rebellion against the Valar when they all crossed to Middle-earth, to the rest of the continent, and that is at the core of the character. So of course, if she's a penitent figure, she is something of a martyr, nothing to do with fighting, and certainly nothing to do with hunting down orcs because her brothers were slain by them or her husband was slain by them, because in what we have from the Rings of Power, it seems like she is going against orcs, hunting them down, because she is angry that they have taken so much away from her. That is something that, as you can see, does not take part in the original works that Tolkien created. She is a tragic figure as much as, for example, Taramiriel, who was forced to marry her cousin because he wanted to usurp the throne and he wanted to legitimize that taking of it. And it's another character that we see also in the Rings of Power. If you dare mention anything about what happens to Galadriel or Taramiriel, then they always tell you, however, as I have tried to point out here with this analysis of just one character and what the author said about the said character, well, you can very well see that it's not the case. That the fans have real concerns about the lore, which is the important thing here. And within the lore are also the themes that Tolkien explored. And he says it quite well when we reviewed what he wrote in letter 142. It was not a conscious effort to try to include his own visions about religion and his own Catholicism, but when he revised the work, he saw that in fact it was quite a religious work, and I reckon that we have to respect at least that within this work. When Payne, I think it was, it was Mackay, I think, who mentioned that they were looking for respecting the lore that Tolkien created and make their own work timeless, just as Tolkien's Legendarium. I think that it was just damage control, as I said in another video, but also it speaks volumes about how these creators, quote-unquote creators, see these works. They are vehicles that they can use to further their careers, nothing more. And in the particular case of Payne and McKay, I think that they are nothing but yes men. They are there to do Amazon's bidding, and that's it. And when that happens, you can bet that the work that they turn out is going to be soulless. Let me know what you think about this topic down below in the comments. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time.